This review is on the DC Collectibles DC Artist Alley Chris Uminga Superman Black and White variant statue. Inspired by a popular comic convention experience, DC Artist Alley is an artist-focused, limited edition designer vinyl figure line that merges indie design with the most iconic characters in the DC universe. Chris Uminga is a Connecticut-based painter and illustrator who blends together creepy and cute. His influences include classic movies, Saturday morning cartoons, graffiti, and lowbrow outsider art. Like we did with Batman, let's go ahead and take a tape measure and put it next to the Man of Steel to find out that this Superman statue stands at 6.5 inches in height. And for comparison, why not bring in the Cape Crusader that we looked at in a previous video? You can clearly see that there is a considerable height difference and stance difference between Batman and Superman here. Batman is more standing straight up in a more stoic pose. Superman, on the other hand, looks like he's about to fight somebody. One of the other main differences between this and Batman, in fact, for that, I'll bring him back in here. The main difference as well, if you can see him, is that while Batman has a much paler contrast of colors, the lights and otherwise dark colors, Superman is really adorned here in more grayscales than anything else, and I guess a lot of that lends itself to what his initial costume colors would be primarily blue and red, translates that to a much darker palette. I think it otherwise works well with Superman. It's a nice contrast and backdrop to his otherwise light-colored head and light-colored fists. One thing he also seems to inherit that, well, Batman didn't inherit as much of, is that glorious panel outlining that I was talking about in his review. Not only are you getting a fair-skinned Superman, but the things such as areas around his eyebrows, around his mouth, around the sides of his eyes as well, he gets these additional panel lining little details added there, and I think it works exceptionally well. Speaking a little to the art style of Chris Uminga, talking a little bit about him being creepy, well, the creepiness definitely shows through here, I think, more so on Superman than it does on Batman. It definitely looks like something I would see in maybe like a stop-motion puppet movie, this sort of design element here. Again, I think it works really well for this particular Superman. We spin him around, and sadly, he does not have the Superman crest on the backside, though. However, you do get a nice sculpted cape, very dense, rigid plastic. And unlike Batman's, it doesn't drape down onto the backdrop here, the display base here. Instead, it sits very comfortably about an inch or so off the base. Speaking of the base, we'll flip that around. Now, this is an artist proof, but normally the black and white releases of these will sit at 500 worldwide, a very scarce low number. So if you wanted to pick these ones up for yourself, they are technically available everywhere. It's not simply a case where you have to go to a convention to get them, or they're exclusive to one brand of store. You can really pick these up anywhere, but quantities will be extremely scarce for these. Going back to a little bit of what I was talking about before, this definitely conveys more Superman in about to be in a fist fight than the stoic nature, the just standing nature of Batman. Now, while I will admit that a lot of the different details on here do get a little bit lost because a lot of it is so much gray, that panel lining that I was talking about does definitely help to separate, say, the trunks from the rest of the legs, the boots from the upper areas of the legs. You can see there's some additional panel lining happening there on the interior of the legs, around the knees, around little wrinkles of the boots. Again, works extremely well. The Superman emblem is raised from its surface, so it's not simply a case of being just painted on. But I absolutely adore this head sculpt. I don't know why, but I really like this extra little tuft of hair. He's slicked it back. In fact, looking at him, I now think of where I'm thinking of this character. I think, when I see him, Eddie Munster. Slicked back hair, small Eddie Munster, depicted here as Superman. That's one thing I'm getting that vibe for when I'm looking at this particular statue. But I do really like the head sculpt. I think the head sculpt is exceptionally well. Very stylized, very small in proportions. In fact, even like the hands convey the sense that this is a younger, smaller version of Superman. And while this isn't necessarily the defaulted color scheme, of course the main color scheme is going to have him in full head-to-toe colors. Very rich, very vibrant colors. I'm really getting the vibes. I'm really getting good vibes here looking at the black and white versions. It somewhat also adds a little bit to the creep factor, the creepiness of these particular releases. The black and white, I get much more the vibe of something like I would see from the Twilight Zone, where you would have this child, or in this case you'd have Superman with very strong, piercing white eyes against the backdrop of an otherwise dark and dingy gray. And again, it works extremely well. And just moving Superman just to the side for a second. I did show this in the review of Batman, but just in case you didn't get a chance to watch that review, again, there are varying different color options for these same three figures, ranging from Standard Edition, which will be available everywhere. Black and White's also available everywhere, which we are looking at right now. I'm really liking the zombies, I have to admit. The additional almost off-coloring, well, extremely off-coloring on Superman. It's almost like a bluish tint to it. And both Batman and Wonder Woman here very much look monstrous in their paint applications. Also like the villain assortment, which essentially has taken those same heroes and given them hero spins. You also have glow-in-the-dark variants and the San Diego Comic-Con, which is actually, well, coming up very soon. It's going to be available exclusively at the Entertainment Earth booth at number 2343. So if you're specifically in the market for the Cape Crusaders here in his various different incarnations, you may want to head over to the Entertainment Earth booth at this San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm certain I said this during the review of the Batman, also from Chris Uminga, that I find his art style translates extremely well to statues. These could also be ideal figures too, but ultimately we're getting them in releases of statue form in a Staction non-posable format. One thing I have said over the course of the many reviews that I've covered DC collectible pieces, artists' styles don't always translate well to plastic form. There's a couple of them, as you probably have seen in those videos, that those particular art styles may look good on paper, don't always work so well when it comes to plastic. Chris Uminga, on the other hand, something about his art style that I find not only is pretty much verbatim, if you look at the image on the left and you look at the statue on the right, they are almost carbon copies to one another. And again, this art style translates extremely well, giving us a slightly distorted interpretation of what Superman could be. And speaking more about the distortions, having it in black and white also works extremely well by adding that little element of creepiness to Superman here. Like I said, if you guys are interested in picking this one up for yourself, it's going to be a little more on the limited side. The black and whites are going to be harder to come by, but if you can find them, I would really highly recommend adding them to your collection. Today we were having a look at the DC Collectibles DC Artist Alley. This was Chris Uminga's black and white variant of Superman. We're going to have a look at the Wonder Woman in the next video, so stay tuned for that. Mark it on your calendar. Okay, you don't really have to mark it on your calendar. Make sure as well you hit that little subscribe button down below. That will guarantee you that when new videos are coming to this channel, you'll never miss out. As well, make sure you head over to the main page after you're finished watching this particular video, as if there's any videos that I've done recently that you may have missed out on, you should be able to find them over in the videos section of the homepage. More videos will be coming your way, so as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.